Hey, this is Kamal Vidal, and you're listening to the Devy Devotion.
Welcome in to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to all things Devy and C2C. Hosted by John Arrington and Aaron Wilcox. This dynamic duo brings you actionable strategies with player-driven analysis for your Devy and C2C leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into talking through the ranks. Welcome into the Devy Devotional. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox 86 on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be talking through our ranks. We're going to bring up some players that maybe we're not 100% sure how to rank, or we could be swayed one way or another if we really had to be. And so we're gonna leave it up to the other person. We're gonna say, hey, change my mind on these players. And so that's what we're gonna be planning on doing. Toronto Dave's already in the chat with the In Beth We Trust, of course. And Aaron's gonna find out about some Beth tonight because I'm gonna help him with his ranks. We're gonna make this easy on him. In fact, I kind of screwed the pooch. Aaron and I are in like multiple leagues together, C leagues, Devy leagues, whatever. And I just gave him a sleeper before we even got on the show, and then I realized that we have like a supplemental draft coming up soon. Now I'm helping the enemy.
Well, that's funny, but it's a tight end sleeper, so it does not count, right? It does not matter. Let's say
it doesn't truly matter, but I gave you a sleeper nonetheless. But how are you doing there, buddy?
I'm doing well, doing well. It's just a joy to be able to hop back on the pod here, and I'm excited to talk through some guys who are, closely ranked, clumped together, we'll say, and we need some help from each other to kind of figure out, who do we actually want from this grouping. So if we're doing startups, if we're doing supplementals, who should we actually be most excited about, or maybe most wary of, out of these groupings of guys? So you can call it keep, trade, cut, or whatever you want to, as far as grouping these guys together. We'll try to make some decisions tonight that will help you as listeners, and maybe give each other a little bit of help along the way here, John.
Yeah, definitely. First, before we get into all that, why don't we talk about how we incorporate freshmen into our actual ranks? Because obviously you've been doing this for longer than I have. You've definitely focused on the freshmen longer than I have. And in the past, it's been kind of up to you as far as the Devy Devotional is concerned for like talking about these players, adding them into the ranks, informing me even about these players. Now I've been doing some more research, I've been doing a little more work in the background, and I'm starting to get a good idea and a good feel for this class. And I'm starting to figure out where I want to put them in. So obviously I'm newer to that part of the game, and so like I definitely can't say that I have like a lockdown way of doing things, but I just kind of have, just like anything else in Dynasty and Devy and C2C, I have tiers. And so that, that's kind of how I break it down, is just I'm looking at the tiers of, this is how I feel about these players. This is how I feel about the players that, they're coming back, sophomores, juniors, seniors, so on and so forth. And then this is how I feel about the freshmen. And then I kind of say, hey, these freshmen could be the top tier guys when it's all said and done. And so I want them to be closer to the top. And then I go, these guys have an 8% hit rate, like some of those tight ends that we were talking about before. Okay, I don't need to have them nearly as high. And so that's really how I'm going about making that determination. But do you have like a set in stone way of doing it?
Yeah, mine might not be quite as objective, quite as analytical, we'll say, but at the end of the day, when I'm sifting through these guys and I'm trying to go through ranks, and especially when it comes down to drafting, it's like if I have a fifth year senior wideout or something like that, who's like maybe safe, he's hitting in some analytical models or measures, and like, okay, he's a solid enough bet. Well, I mean, maybe that production is somewhat guaranteed for that season. But if he's not a true difference maker, if he doesn't have that elite talent or at least upside, I'm not so sure I want that fifth year guy over a freshman with big time upside. That's where I start making these determinations of like, I mean, he's fun, but I'm going to start passing on like a Juice Wells, Antoine Wells, or like a Tosh Harris, or something like somebody like that for some of these tantalizing freshmen, just because I don't know if that ultimate upside is going to be there. So, for example, like for quarterbacks out of the rookies, I want Dylan Raiola, I want DJ Lagway over a guy like maybe Will Howard. Like I know Howard's got some things going his way. He's got some talent, but at the end of the day, why don't we kind of re-roll that dice and see if Raiola or a Lagway can really take off and become an elite prospect and eventually an NFL asset, or I'm talking like a Taylor Tatum or Quentin Martin amongst freshman running backs over a Darius Taylor, over a Jaden Blue, etc. It's like it just makes total sense at that point just to kind of slot in some of these freshmen over the upperclassmen, or vice versa. I mean, I want the more proven guy like a Damian Martinez or somebody like that over some random freshman like a Nate Frazier or a Cam Davis. It might be close, I guess, in rankings, but at some point you got to say what you've done so far matters, and that you have an NFL or at least a potential NFL future. And weighing that process is not easy. So that's why you listen to different podcasts, get some opinions from folks in the industry, subscribe to Beth, subscribe to some of the things that are out there resource wise to help you really sift through like, is it worth getting this upperclassman guy, or should I just try to take a shot on one of these freshmen? I mean, we know that freshman hit rates are not that excellent, but at the end of the day, I mean, if it's not the exciting guy that you want, you might as well try one of these guys who could be a huge riser.
Yeah, and like you said, I'm new to the game. I'm new to that part of the game, so I don't want to act like I'm some professional when it comes to it. I'm kind of just throwing him. Like I said, I'm doing it objectively, but I'm kind of just throwing them in where I feel, and so like it's I guess it's subjectively objective, if that makes any sense. It's like I'm objectively throwing them in the ranks that they're in because of Fresh Beth, but then I'm kind of throwing them in willy-nilly, like how I feel, like where I feel. So it's not a perfect science just yet. I will admit that. But with Devy, is it ever going to be a perfect science? Probably not. So I think that's the important thing, is that I believe that Devy rankings are more, at least I feel like for a lot of people, Devy rankings are a projection of where they want somebody to be. Not even necessarily where they are. Whereas with my Devy rankings, it's actually more of where they are. But with the freshmen, it's more of where I want them to be. And so I'm trying to like work that out. And maybe one day I'll 100% figure it out.
But you're right. The upside when we're talking Devy or we're talking just NFL potential, that has to be there, right? If these guys don't really have like a high end trait or a skill set, something like that, then why are we getting excited? So that is a big part of the evaluation. It's not the only thing, but certainly something we'll talk about tonight.
Yeah, and I'm going back into it. I've been doing more research, and I'm glad I did. I talked about doing it last year, that I wanted to do more research and figure out how to make it actually something that we can, use and utilize for drafting freshmen, and figure out how to make it to where we figure out which freshmen we want to draft, which ones we want to avoid, and not just saying, "Oh, there's a 20% hit rate. There's a 15% hit rate." That doesn't really help anyone. It shows what is happening, but it's not truly telling you, okay, well, now who do I draft or who do I avoid, and that kind of thing. And that's more of what I'm focusing on this year. And I'm hoping to put out an article here very soon about all of this and how it's actually leading me to what I've built with FreshBeth now, where now I'm actually saying this is who I want to draft and this is who I want to avoid, and I've actually put them into the tiers, and I have percentages like this tier has a 40% hit rate, this tier has an 8% hit rate, and so on and so forth. This one has a 23% hit rate. So it shows you how you can feel about these players. And I mean, the sad part is that a 40% hit rate is about as good as you're gonna get. Like that's almost unheard of in like Devy purposes, like for Devy purposes, to get a a 40% hit rate, you probably can't find too many people that can show you that can actually prove to you, hey, I have this. And, like, so unfortunately, that's the sad truth, is that that's what we're hoping for, is like, hey, I can hit 40% of the time.
Yeah, it's never a sure bet here in the Devy landscape, but we're going to try to give you the best bets of what is available with options tonight.
That is very true. But like we said, we're gonna go through here. We're gonna talk about some players. Some are gonna be freshmen, some are gonna be your upperclassmen. But we're just basically going through some ranks that we're maybe struggling with a little bit. We don't know exactly how to feel. At the very least, even if we feel a certain way, maybe we're open to being swayed a different way. With some new information, or just talking it through. Sometimes you even if you feel a certain way about a player, sometimes you go through and you put your ranks down, and then somebody brings something up and you go, huh, okay, yeah, I can move now. I can move this guy now. And so, that's basically what we're gonna do, but we're gonna do it through a podcast, and hopefully you guys will benefit from that. Hopefully we'll benefit from it as well, and hopefully it'll be good radio. But basically we're just going to go through. I guess it was Aaron's idea, so we can go ahead and you can start us out however you'd like, and we'll start with the QBs.
Oh yeah, QB sound good, and got three interesting quarterbacks here for you. DJ Legway, Florida, versus Dylan Gabriel, now going to Oregon, or Cam Ward, who's now transferring into Miami. So basically, from those three guys, tell me, is there a guy that you clearly want, or if we don't have to do like the keep trade cut, but if you have a clear like, oh yeah, this is the 1, 2, 3, you could let me know there, John. What are your thoughts with Legway versus Dylan Gabriel versus Cam Ward?
I mean, the honest truth is it's tough because I don't feel great about any of them. But that's just the God honest truth. But honestly, if I was putting one at one, then I say, hey, I feel like this guy at least has a shot at NFL production, being an NFL player, that kind of thing, gaining value, whatever you want to call it. It's Dylan Gabriel. And I know that you have expressed not love for him, recently, just saying how like you feel like how, he would have already come out and things like that, and I can't argue with that. I mean, he's going to be a 6-year player. Like, this is not the road that we want for our Devy players. But I look at what he's done in college, and it's pretty damn good. And then I look at the fact that he did it at a school that has put out, quality players into the NFL. Now, he is not in the NFL, so that doesn't necessarily help us. But now he's going to Oregon, who is putting Bo Nix into the NFL when he doesn't deserve it at all. And, we have no idea at this point where Bo Nix is exactly going to go. But if we just say on the conservative end that he gets drafted in like the 3rd or 4th round of the NFL draft, which I think is pretty realistic, wouldn't you agree? Yeah. So
Yeah,
if we just go the conservative route, because there's some people saying he's going to go at 12 to Denver, and I'm like, all right, we're not going that crazy. But if we go the conservative route, say he's in the 3rd or 4th round, Dylan Gabriel's a much better quarterback than Bo Nix. He's going to the same exact system with arguably better players now in the system, and he's probably going to go light it up. He's actually at the 2nd best odds to win the Heisman this year, if I remember correctly, in Vegas. So at the very least, even if he doesn't actually, I mean, even if we take the actual NFL part out of it and we just say he wins the Heisman, or is at least in a runner-up, or close enough or whatever, his value is going to go up. There's going to be people talking about him because of the system, because of Oregon, because of everything that's going on right there. The national limelight, all that kind of good stuff. But then, we've seen that matter for the NFL as well. And so I think it can turn into Devy purposes, or, I mean, moving on to the NFL as well. And so that's why I would have him as the clear one out of those three. DJ Lagway is a complete projection at this point. Once again, I'm newer to the freshman thing. I don't film grind on freshmen. I don't scout the freshmen. All I do is kind of say how great of a chance do they have at hitting, And right now, I'm giving DJ Lagway a 23% chance of hitting. Okay, I mean it's not terrible, not great. It is what it is, and that's actually pretty good for a QB in Devy. To say 23%, but unfortunately, it's still not great. Just about a 1 in 5 shot. But we also know that Florida has not been great at putting quarterbacks in the NFL, except for the one that the one that never made sense. That one gets drafted early, but then everyone else is kind of terrible with Anthony Richardson, of course. But so yeah, I really struggled to believe in Lagway. Obviously, he's the highest valued one of the three right now. But we've seen how quickly these QBs can fall off, and honestly, I don't think he gets on the field in year one. As bad as Graham Mertz is, I think he does enough to keep Lagway off the field, and so you can't even gain value or anything like that this year. So that's why I would much rather have a Gabriel where he can actually gain value and all that. And then you can get the hell out of here with Cam Ward. Like, that dude does not deserve to even be in this conversation as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, I like it. I'm coming out with the fire there with Cam Ward because I know a lot of guys do have Cam Ward either ahead of Dylan Gabriel or in that same range, and then even maybe close to DJ Lagway, depending on, how high or low you are on that situation in Florida for DJ Lagway. So we know that there's concerns there. Obviously, I think if you're talking talent alone, the upside makes you really attracted to Lagway. But I mean, you made some really good points there with Dylan Gabriel as well going to Oregon. So, like you said, better than what Bo Nix has done. And then now he's going to a very, very good offense again there. So you got some good points. Now, what do you got for me? Do you have some interesting quarterbacks for me to sift through here?
Yeah, I think so. We have two that are essentially tied in Beth right now. And so it'll be really interesting to see how you feel about the two. And then we also have a freshman in Dylan Raiola, but we have Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, and Dylan Raiola. I'm kind of struggling to rank them because I know how I feel about Quinn Ewers personally, but then Beth feels a certain way as well. And then Dylan Raiola is the top guy in the class for most people, but he's going to Nebraska. It's just, it's I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a good pick of players, honestly. A lot of folks are moving Carson Beck up, who is at Georgia, and Georgia's going to have this successful season, right? As a team, we can just anticipate that they're gonna be a top 4 team in the nation. They're gonna have some success on offense because of the players that they're bringing in. You like London Humphreys, you've talked about him before. Um, there are some other wide receivers in place there, whether you like Dominic Lovett or not. He is capable. He's at least solid enough. Natarian Tuggle, another guy, a freshman that I believe both you and I kind of like. There are other pieces there transferring in or just who have already been there that will be reliable targets for Carson Beck. And I have him as the number one of this group. So this is by no means saying that Quinn Ewers is trash, Dylan Raiola's not great, but at the end of the day, Carson Beck has done just enough to warrant that. And I think he's set up for a good situation. And, even though he's a little bit older, he's been around for a few years now in college. He just hasn't gotten that opportunity. And he earned that last year. He really proved that he belongs as the starter there. It's pretty unquestionable at this point that he's going to retain that role versus Quinn Ewers. It's like, is Arch Manning going to potentially take over at some point if there's injury, if there's other things going on there? And then at the end of the day, Quinn Ewers is set up in a good situation as well. So I don't want to take away there, but maybe there's a few other questions there with him losing his job. And then Dylan Raiola, I really like him. I have him as a QB1 in this incoming class, but you talked about some of the concerns with these incoming freshman quarterbacks and hit rates. I mean, Raiola, I really am rooting for him. I want him to succeed at Nebraska, but at the end of the day, Carson Beck has shown enough. Even Quinn Ewers has at this point, and their situations are more promising than Nebraska's, where I'm saying, let's side with those options. So probably the Beck, Ewers, and then Raiola is how I would have that grouping.
That's exactly how I have it right now, so I guess I'm feeling pretty good about that. The funny thing is that Beck and yours are literally tied in QB Beth, but it's because Beck is a year older. So like it's basically saying that Beck has played better, but he's a year older, and so it's kind of giving him a slight knock, like not a year older, but like a college year, a year in college older,
Right.
and
So in
so it's
actual years, it could be like 2 or 3 years
yeah,
older,
I have no
right?
idea. I have no idea of
Something
their
like that.
actual age, and honestly, I don't even truly care for quarterbacks. But it's saying the year in college. He has an extra year in college, so it's kind of saying like he should be better, by doing that, and that's why they're actually ending up being tied when it's all said and done. But it's just really difficult for me to say, and they both kind of have great surroundings and everything, supporting casts, and it's really tough for me to differentiate, but I just know that I don't believe in Quinn Ewers, and I'm not saying that I truly believe in Carson Beck, but it's just so I end up having Carson Beck ahead of him.
And that's fair. And you know what? I just looked up the age of these guys. They're not that far apart. Like, yes, Carson Beck's older, but like it's less than a year actually. So it's not bad. And happy belated birthday to you, Quinn Ewers, if you're listening to the pod.
Ooh,
Yep, happy birthday. That was
yeah,
last week, I guess. So
he usually does. I probably should be a little nicer, but we try to be honest here on the Debbie devotional. It's actually kind of surprising because he reclassified. You kind of would have thought that he would have
yeah,
been
right.
younger.
Yeah, I guess you never know with some of the ages of these guys.
Yeah, that's true too. Who knows? He could have been an older high schooler, and that's why he reclassified. Who absolutely knows? I was always one of the younger people in my class. Like I graduated when I was 17 and everything. So
Ah,
I
there you go. Me too. Me too.
yeah, look at us. Look at us.
Young guys. But I want to hit you with another couple QBs here. Jalen Daniels, Kansas quarterback, versus Garrett Nussmeier, taking over at LSU, versus Austin Mack, transferring into Alabama. Some open opportunity there, potentially. But what do you think of that grouping of Jalen Daniels versus Garrett Nussmeier versus Austin Mack?
Well, you know me, and hopefully the listeners know I've been talking about Jalen Daniels for a couple of years now. Like I was all over Jalen last year, like going into last off season, saying he can take that next step forward. Like he needed to take a step forward, but he can. He has that possibility. Unfortunately, he got hurt, and he really didn't have a chance to do anything. So it was kind of a wasted year. Which when he was already a junior, that just means that, now we're moving on to our senior season, and we have to do it all over again. He can take a step forward this year. We just have to see if it actually happens. I don't have him that far behind Beck and Ewers, like not that far. He's a tier below, but it's for me because he has shown flashes. He's shown the rushing ability, he's shown the passing ability. I mean, he's really done some pretty nice things, but it just like I said, he just kind of always needed to take one step forward to say, okay, I believe he can actually do it in the NFL now. And so that's all we're kind of waiting for him to do is A, be healthy, and then B, actually go out and do it. I know there's some excitement for Garrett Nussmeier. You're not going to find it from me. I don't know how to feel about LSU. Like there's some exciting players and prospects and everything that are going there. But if we're banking on Garrett Nussmeier being the guy, I just really struggle with that because like he hasn't really, hasn't been the biggest sample. I'm trying to look at how many passes he actually attempted so far. Let's see, where is he? Attempts. So he has 219 passing attempts in his college career, which is a decent sample. I mean, that's like what, a half a year for a normal college prospect or something like that. And I will give him credit that he has a very high intended air yards, and he has a high big time throw rate. So that's great. That's what we love to see. Now, what he does have is he has a pretty low PPR points per touch, which means he's probably not completing a lot of those passes. And here we go. We look at it when he has a 58.9% completion rate, a 3.2% interception rate, and a negative 3.3 yards per carry, which means takes on a lot of sacks and stuff like that. So that's not what we want to see from our new stud quarterback that's going to take over and be a, what people used to say was going to be an upgrade from Jaden Daniels. And I never believed that. And then here we are. I don't know, like, because especially with that, you almost assume that he's coming in when Jaden Daniels needs a break or when they're destroying a team or whatever it might be. So you would almost say that they're playing against easier competition when he's coming on, and yet his numbers are pretty shitty. So, like it does not give me confidence in a fairly decent size or sample size for me to say, that I want him. And the funny thing is, I said how I'm completely out on Cam Ward and everything. I have Cam Ward one spot ahead of Garrett Nussmeier. So if I was out on Cam Ward, I don't even know what to say anymore. And then who was the last one? Oh, Austin Mack. Okay, so
Yeah.
like, what are the odds of Austin Mack getting on the field? Like, slim to none. I'm not a big believer in Jalen Milroe, but we've just seen these big time schools. They're not going to go to the freshman prospect or whatever, or it happens so rarely. I'm not banking on it, and it's not like Austin Mack was this amazing prospect anyway. So I'm not saying that he can't ever be anything. It's not going to be this year, and so I would easily have Jalen Daniels, tier break, Austin Mack, tier break, Garrett Nussmeier.
Wow. We'll let that one sink in for the people out there expecting a huge LSU season from their quarterback. And I mean, Nussmeier, you're right. He's going to have to take a big step forward. I don't have the answer if he's going to be able to do that. Like, he lost, um, I mean, a very high end talent to Malik Neighbors. And then Brian Thomas Jr. was no slouch either. Like, that's a big loss. And now they're like none of us know what to do in that LSU wide receiver room. Like, none of us know who to draft, when to draft them. We're grasping at straws. We're seeing like all these year 1-0 guys and transfers from like G5 levels, and we're saying, oh, this guy's the answer. It's like all of these guys are just not special. So how is that supposed to help elevate Garrett Nussmeier as well, when he's trying to take that step forward? So yeah, obviously concerns there, but there's concerns with all these guys. Like you said, Jalen Daniels, I mean, he's never played more than 9 games in a season. In fact, last year had 3. The year before it was that 9, but then before that was 6 and 7. It's like he's struggled at times, and he doesn't hit some of the thresholds I would like to see as far as like size and things like that from a guy who's not. I mean, Kansas is not like the highest level of competition, but at the end of the day, I didn't give you like these top tier options. I gave you Jalen Daniels, Nussmeier, and Austin Mack. So you're making the best with that situation. And I like how you broke down the Mack thing. It's like he could be really talented. He's following DeBoer over there to Alabama, but that by no means guarantees he's going to get the shot this year. It just means that at some point, DeBoer might be willing to at least give him a shot. So I don't mind how you broke down those quarterbacks at all there, John.
Well, thank you. And I didn't actually like talk about Jalen Daniels' numbers or anything like that. And honestly, I was saying he needs to take a step forward. But I really think that step forward is staying healthy, like staying on the field. Because I was looking at his actual numbers, and the research that I've done with like big time throw rate and intended air yards, I'm looking for better than 9.5 intended air yards, like how far they're throwing it down the field in each attempt, and over 5 big time throw rate. And he's at 5.1% big time throw rate and 9.9 for intended air yards. He's at 0.78, almost 0.8 for PPR points per touch, which is right in line with some of the top guys. And then, he is hitting a lot of other things. 2.1% for the interception rate, which is a little higher than I would like it to be, but definitely within an acceptable range. And he has yards per carry, a decent yards per carry, so it's showing that he has that athleticism that we kind of covet in football. But then he has a 10.1 adjusted yards per attempt in his best season, so it's showing us that he's growing as a player as well. And it just, all that stuff adds up. It just really, he needs to stay on the field and show an NFL team that he can actually be there for them. And so I think if we can get a healthy season, he can actually take a step forward and be one of those top guys in a very ambiguous QB class.
Yeah, good points. And you're right, he has progressed. So, I mean, just because he has not been healthy in the past doesn't mean that he can't. It's just, that many years of not being able to be healthy, I mean, it's a big make or break here. There's no doubt about that.
All right, so I have some more QBs for you as well, and I'm gonna go with a different Jalen, a Jalen we kind of just talked about with Jalen Milroe, a big name in the Devy and especially the C2C space, which is Lenore Sellers, and then one of the hottest names for a while now, and a true freshman in Julian Sayin. And I know this one might be a little more difficult for you, but I figured I'd throw a little curveball to you on this one.
No, no, I like that. And honestly, I struggled because initially I was like, yeah, I go with Jalen Milroe. Like there's just, just a lot of hype. He's still worth a good amount to a lot of managers out there and Devy C2C leagues. And you start thinking about it, it's like Lenora Sellers has not really proven it to this point. Like, I mean, in a really small sample, sure, but at the end of the day, not only does he have to hold down the job, but then he has to prove that he's like an NFL worthy talent, which is it's no small task at South Carolina. Like with those weapons there, he's really going to have to ball out and elevate the supporting cast. And I think that at the end of the day, I like Lenora Sellers, but I liked him when I could get him in the late rounds of supplementals. Like I was drafting him like crazy then, but now his price is really elevated. So I don't think I'm going to go that route. And then now it becomes kind of a two-man race there. And I think that Jalen Milroe and Julian Sayin are very interesting options. I mean, at the end of the day, Jalen Milroe is the guy where it's like, can he actually become an NFL level passer is the big issue because we know he's a great athlete. I mean, Jalen Milroe had over 500 rushing yards last season for 12 rushing touchdowns. Like that is impressive. And then even his passing, like you look at his completion percentage and his yards per team or yards per attempt, like those actually were not bad marks. Not that they were great, or even touchdown to interception ratio, not bad, but considering like how good of a team, it was a pretty solid team, let's say at Alabama last year. You would have maybe expected a little bit better if he's going to be a high end prospect, but he has some things going his way. But with that change in coaching staff, there's no guarantee. Versus they at Ohio State, they really wanted Julian Sayin, and Julian Sayin's like this high end refined passer. And what do we want at the NFL level? Well, first of all, we need guys to be competent as passers. That is just a must. So at the end of the day, I think that Sayin brings that versus Milroe's a bigger question mark to this point. I think Milroe has taken some strides forward, but he needs to really make another big step versus I think Sayin's just the better, easier transition to being a potential pro quarterback with Julian Sayin going to Ohio State. So I am going to side slightly with Julian Sayin and then Milroe and then Sellers in this case.
Yeah, and obviously I know I'm usually the one with the prospects and the recruits that say, like prove it to me, show me that you can get on the field, show me you can do it. And so I have it kind of the opposite. I have Milroe, then Sellers, and then Sayin, but I mean they're in the same tier, so I mean that's why I put them up here. Like I'm willing to move them and interchange them, but Jalen Milroe did take a step forward last year. He especially towards the end of the year, he kind of made some strides. Now, like in the playoffs, he kind of showed who he truly is and everything. So I'm not saying he's like a great prospect or anything at this point, but going back to like the intended air yards and the big time throw rate, he's not that far off. He is 10.9 for his college career intended air yards, and he's a 4.6 for the big time throw rate. So he's not quite there for the big time throw rate, but he's not that far off. I mean, if he has, takes a step forward this year, he might be able to hit those thresholds. But then he has that athletic ability. He has that rushing nature and everything that we love to see for college or for the NFL. I mean, and so why wouldn't you want to hold out hope for him? I don't think it's gonna happen, but I have to at least give him credit that it can happen. Now, of course, he's changing systems and stuff, so we really have to see how this all plays out. But that's why I have him at the top, because of the three, like who has the best, and that's kind of, this is Devy. This is a Devy show. These are Devy rankings. I'm looking for who has the best odds to make it to the NFL and to be an NFL player for my fantasy team. And right now I'm saying I think that Jalen Milroe has the best odds. That doesn't mean any of it's guaranteed. And I have them ranked where I'm showing I don't believe it's guaranteed.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it kinda brings you back to, like, how I initially led that off, and it's like, um, do you take the guy who's been there a couple of years where you're like, "Well, he has better odds, but does he have the better upside, right? Does he have the ultimate NFL future?" And I see Corey in the chat here, and he says that Milrow locks onto his first read longer than it takes Mike to give up on a misfit. Ooh,
Just
okay.
murdering his co-host,
Dirty
man.
Mike needs to get on the Debbie devotional here and stick up for himself. So, but I love it. Thanks, Corey, for also, he was commenting on Jalen Daniels and the concern with injuries, which I think is all valid. We talked about that a bit, but I like that you brought up Jalen Monroe. Honestly, I mean, I didn't expect you to be defending him of anybody, but it's all relative because I gave you three options, or I guess you gave me these options, and at the end of the day, Milrow, I was kind of interested, like some of the strides that he made, I guess, to progress. Like that's interesting to me. And like you said, he's that Konami code. He's a great rusher, and that system. I think that you made a very good point of like that system changes things up. Like it's very quarterback friendly. It made Michael Penix Jr. look like he was going to be a lock first rounder, and we know that Penix is probably not that, right? So, at the end of the day, Jalen Milrow, he's going to have some solid weapons there still at Alabama. That's very interesting. So I could see you kind of convincing me to actually move back up Milrow ahead of Julian Sand or even a couple of those guys in my Devy ranks. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, what are the odds of Julian Sane? Like, Julian Sane is probably the best quarterback at Ohio State right now. I don't even think that's saying much, unfortunately for them. But just like I was saying with Austin Mack not seeing the field this year or probably even next year or whenever, like, these teams are not going to put that guy in for no reason. Like, it's going to take an injury. It's going to take just a major malfunction by the starter. And even though I don't think that Jalen Milrow is necessarily going to take that next step forward, he can. I don't think that Will Howard is a quality quarterback, but it gives them a better chance right now at winning games than Julian Sand does. And that's what these coaches want, And so I just don't think they're getting on the field. And unfortunately with Ohio State, the way that they've been doing things, and like, there's no guarantee that they're not just going to do the same thing next year and just bring in another transfer. And with this new day and age, this new world, the wild, wild west, like we can't say like anyone could be there. So, I mean, it's just, I want guys that are guaranteed a job, guaranteed a start, and we cannot say that about Julian Sand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. There's definitely a projection there, and you have to say, or you have to be willing to say that he could be nothing, but he could also be pretty high-end asset for sure. So should I hit you with some running backs here? I think that this has been a
Yes.
good quarterback talk, but how about I give you a couple running backs here who are not necessarily like the tier one type of backs, but at the end of the day, very interesting assets nonetheless in Devy and C2C leagues. And that's Abu Sama, who's at Iowa State versus DJ Giddens, Kansas State. Or I'll give you any freshman running back in the entire class, any incoming freshman. What are you taking there? Like, I mean, and I'm not saying that you can pick you could pick maybe your RB1 in the class. But would you rather take a guy who's shown something in Avisama or DJ Giddens, or you're rolling the dice there with somebody who has not necessarily proven anything or shown anything at the college level quite yet?
Yeah, and this is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, how do I add freshmen into my ranks? And I have Taylor Tatum as my RB1 in the class. Like, by far RB1 in the class, going to Oklahoma, has the size, has the pedigree, 5-star prospect, all that kind of good stuff. Everything you want to see. And I have him literally one spot ahead of Abu Sama. But technically I have a tier break in between them. Now, once again, it's an objectively subjective or subjectively objective way of doing things. So it's really just like, I decided I wanted Taylor Tatum to be a tier ahead at the end of the tier. Like, that was basically the decision that I made. but that's how it is right now. But technically, they're one rank, they're one spot different in my ranks. So that just goes to show you that I do feel pretty good about Abu Sama. I might actually be one of the higher people on Abu Sama. I don't know if that's true or not. I should probably look at other people's ranks and actually like pay attention before I just like randomly say things. But
I have him top 20 in Devy, if that gives it, like in running backs.
yeah,
I don't know if that gives you an idea, but
he's my RB18 with, or yeah, he's my RB18 with like freshman and everything, built in. So,
yeah.
I mean, I maybe not the highest, but I'm pretty high on him. So I feel pretty good about him. DJ Giddens is a tier below that for me, below Abusama even. And I get that he what do you have, that like one huge game? Didn't he have like a 200-yard game or something like that? And then he really kind of fell off after that. It wasn't nearly as exciting. So I guess we can say, hey, he has some like flashes, but I don't know that I truly believe in him as like an NFL talent or anything like that. And I'm pretty sure he's a senior as well, if I'm remembering that correctly. So I don't think he has a lot of room to grow or, or anything like that as a player. So I kind of feel like he is who he is. He's right there where, like he could be one of those guys that just like sneaks in later on and I go, hey, I like him as a sleeper. But right, I feel more like Taylor Tatum or Abu Sama could actually be in the mix, when it's all said and done. Like, hey, like this is a top 5 guy or whatever in this class. Like, I don't think that DJ Giddens has that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's fair. I mean, I think how you slot in the freshman makes a big difference into this. Like, I truthfully, I don't have like a solid take. Like, you should clearly be taking Taylor Tatum, this or that. But I guess I'll counter you with the question: would you rather have like any sort of first in the supplemental draft, or would you rather have Abu Sama, or would you rather have, like DJ Giddens? And most people are going to probably take that late first, even. Like, I mean, yes, obviously early first over those guys, but in the late first, you're probably going to be taking like a Taylor Tatum type of guy, or at least at the early second mark, right around that turn. So, at the end of the day, I do think that Taylor Tatum has a lot going for him, or whoever your RB1 is in the class. You can say it's a down class, but there are some talented guys in interesting long term situations here. Versus, like you said, Abu Sama and DJ Giddens, they've flashed, but have they been consistent? And I guess Giddens was somewhat, he was up and down last year, but he had 1,200 rushing yards, and he had those blow up games. Like, I watched this UCF game, he was just magical. I don't know what type of pregame hype was going on there in that locker room, but I mean, DJ Giddens was looking like Saquon Barkley out there. It was ridiculous, but he obviously did not continue on with that because it took him 6 more weeks to break the 100-yard mark again, and he
Yeah.
was not like insanely efficient. And his level of competition, you'd think that if he was a true stud, he'd be a little bit better, but Kansas State, I guess he's got limitations there. So I like those guys kind of similarly between Abasama and Giddens, but I think you made some really good points, I guess, between the two guys. I'm excited to see what Abasama can do this year at Iowa State as well.
Well, I mean, I talked about how I feel about him. I didn't talk about why I feel the way that I feel about him. So just to show you the difference, you're talking about a sophomore versus a senior. So obviously that's going to make a difference of how I feel about them. One has the potential to grow, and the other one's probably who he is, that kind of thing. But then you also have Abu Sama has 1.2 PPR points per touch. DJ Giddens has 1, and that's right at that threshold. Like, I don't want you to be below 1. As long as you're at 1 or above, I'm fine with you. I'm happy with you. But 1.2 is getting closer to that top tier. Like I'm saying, like if he can continue that and get into a bigger role, touch the ball more, and continue to get 1.2 PPR points per touch, he's going to be in that top tier of players. Like, he's going to be in that top 5. He also has Abu Sama has a 13% big time run rate last year, and DJ Giddens has a 7%. Now, 7% is getting really close to that 6% that I don't want. Like, once you're below 7%, I'm like, you probably just don't have what it takes. And it sounds so stupid to 1% difference, but honestly, it does truly make a difference. And then the 13% is probably going to come down with a larger role for Abu Sama, because 13% is almost unheard of for like anyone that has like a major role. But it just shows that he has that athletic nature, that he has that burst and that speed that we want. And so that's why I have them separated. That's why I have DJ Giddens a tier below. So, it's not just me saying, oh, I like this guy and I don't like this guy. Like, there's actually reasons for it.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, Abu Sama is very exciting. So very interested to see what he has ahead of him there in a second season at Iowa State, which has been able to churn out running backs. I mean, look at David Montgomery and then Brees Hall. So obviously they have some history there with putting out these backs versus, I mean, I can't really say the same with Kansas State off the top of my head. I mean, DJ Giddens, I think he could totally be in like that, I don't know, like Tony Pollard to Tyjae Spears type of realm, but does that make him like a work or like an Aaron Jones? And maybe, I mean, DJ Giddens is listed as a little bit heavier than that potentially, depending on the source, but like 200 to like 212 pounds. I still think he's more of that type of back than a true like bell cow absolute stud by any means. So
Yeah, I
good
have
points.
Giddens closer to like a Kendall Milton from like this class. Closer to that. I'm not truly comping the players or anything, just saying like they kind of end up in like a similar area in the model. And so
Well, that's not good at all. No,
no.
no, no.
No.
Obviously, like you said, it's not a comp because, like, play style wise, I mean, I see him similar to like Pollard, and I don't know how he would end up, that many years back in your model, but
I don't
again,
have him in
maybe
the Devy
not a
model. He
stud.
was okay. He
Yeah,
was pretty good in the NFL model, but unfortunately I can't really compare it here because it is a little different.
you are good.
But and that might not even have been a good like comp. I was just trying to look through like this year's players and say like Michael Wiley. It's not good. There's not a lot of great. There's not a lot of great names here that we can like truly say, hey, like this guy is who I'm thinking of. So unfortunately, yeah, I'm going with I'm going with a Michael Wiley or Kendall Milton as my not playstyle comp, but like how I feel about them comp. But I mean,
Very
also I
fair.
do like I do think that they were close enough that I understand the why you might be kind of going back and forth with them, but I would definitely lean towards Abusama, and then Taylor Tatum is in a part of Fresh Beth that is like saying he has at least a 40% hit rate. Like that players in that realm have or in that tier have a 40% hit rate going back at least 5 years. I think I've gone back now. So it's not a perfect science. I'm not done with the research, but I mean it's showing that he has pretty good odds of hitting, about as good of odds as you can get for for a freshman recruit. So I really do feel like he's gonna be great when it's all said and done. And maybe even he has a better chance of being like a workhorse than Abusama does. And so that's why I have him just slightly ahead, even though it's 100% a projection.
I love it. Sign me up.
All right, who do you got for or no, who do I have for you is now the good question. So obviously we're not going to talk about running backs and not talk about my baby Dylan Sampson. I had to bring him up. I had to find some players that I kind of felt were close. There might even be a tier break in here, but they're close enough to where I feel like it'll be a good conversation here. But I have Dylan Sampson, Donovan Edwards, which is obviously a controversial and difficult player to rank, and then Katron Allen as well, who's another one that I know you haven't always loved, but man, I'll tell you what, he keeps on plucking.
Yeah, I think that Katron Allen, for some, he's the cup of tea, and for me, it's never been there because I just don't think the high end athleticism is there, and he's not special as like a pass catcher, this or that. certainly a type of guy who could gain an NFL role because he's that solid. Like, I mean, could he do some of the same things that like a Najee Harris is doing at the NFL level? And I would say probably, but I don't think he's going to get the same draft capital and maybe lengthy leash that like a Najee Harris has received. And I'm not even saying that's like perfect comp, but I just don't think that Katron is that transcendent athlete, and that's going to make a big difference at the end of the day. And he's not going to be a workhorse either in college. Like we know Nick Singleton's there. So I think that, it becomes interesting with Dylan Sampson. It's like, what can he become in the SEC as potentially a guy taking on a bigger role there, but I still don't consider him a 3-down back in his own right as well. So Donovan Edwards, for me, whether he's going to be a workhorse or not, he possesses that athletic upside and size, some of the things that you really covet with that receiving ability, that makes him a very intriguing prospect. And he doesn't need 20 carries in a game to be a stud. Like he could receive maybe 12, 15 carries and then get involved in the receiving game. And he's so explosive that I could see him really rebounding after a season where he was out with injury. Like if I take that into account and I consider that he was rebounding from knee surgery and it really took him a while to get right. I'm not trying to defend his vision because he has flaws as a runner, like no doubt. Like he's not always the most efficient guy. He runs into his offensive lineman's backs and he's not breaking runs all the time, but he started to look a little bit more healthy there down the stretch for Michigan. And Donovan Edwards, he just has the opportunity ahead of him. Like Blake Corum's gone, and we know how good Blake Corum was in college. Like the fact that he kept Donovan Edwards from a bigger role is not necessarily this huge slight against Edwards because we know that Corum was like a top 5 college back. I mean, he's been amazing the last 2 seasons despite injury too. So Donovan Edwards stepping into a bigger role there as potentially that number 1 back. We can't really say that for Katron Allen. And even if we say that with Dylan Sampson, it's like, I don't know if a guy at Dylan Sampson's size, I don't even think he's as good of an athlete as Donovan Edwards. I'm just not quite seeing that same upside there for Sampson. So for me, it's Donovan Edwards, and it's not particularly close. But I get why, the Katron Allen versus Dylan Sampson, that might actually become a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I have them all really close, and I mean, I've always been a huge Donovan Edwards fan, so, and I do have him at number 1, so I agree with you, but I have Dylan Sampson directly behind him, so I don't feel like they're that different, but I mean, they actually hit a lot of like the same thresholds and the same numbers and everything. The funny thing is that I was just talking about how I don't want players to be at that 6% big time run rate, and of course, Katron Allen is. So like like I'm agreeing with you that he doesn't necessarily have the athleticism. I was on the Full Tilt Devy pod with Josh Chevalier from Fantasy Points, and we were talking about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, and I was saying, just looking at the numbers, I've never watched them personally. I've literally never watched a single snap from Nick Singleton or Katron Allen. But just looking at their numbers, I feel like if you combined the 2 players, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, you might have the best running back in all of college. Like they're, you give Katron Allen, who's like an extremely good running back, but doesn't have the athleticism that you need to be an NFL running back. And then you have Nick Singleton, who's a terrible running back, but is just hyper athletic. If you combine the 2, you might have like Bijan Robinson plus, but unfortunately we can't combine the 2. So I do have Katron Allen 3rd. I don't have like high expectations for him, but the fact that he's even up here shows that he has something. Like he has something that like I said, I think he's a good running back. Like I think he's an actual good running. I don't even know how to say it the proper way besides just saying he's a good running back over and over again. But like I feel like he has the vision, he has the fundamentals, he has all that kind of stuff that you want a running back to have. He's just not athletic enough.
Yeah, no, I think that's well put, and I would agree with that limitation with him. And I will just put one thing into perspective, or at least I'll ask a question of you, John. So, would you rather have the 192-pound back who is not very, or like fairly athletic, but not very athletic, or would you rather have the 210-pound back who is extremely athletic and more accomplished as a receiver in Donovan Edwards? Because I think that's really, for me, it's like that's why I'm seeing a big difference there, because Dylan Sampson, he's 20 pounds lighter, but he to me is not more explosive. Like, I think if you're taking who will test better in like the 40-yard dash and some of these athletic testing things, I think honestly Donovan Edwards is going to out test Dylan Sampson at 20 pounds heavier. And I think for me, that makes a big difference. And even looking at the receiving production that Donovan Edwards has done thus far in his career, I believe he has like 60 or 70 receptions thus far in 3 years, despite not playing like a huge role, like not being the full-time starter by any means. So just a lot of things that I like out of Donovan Edwards, not to rag on Sampson, but I think more of it is just how much I think that Edwards could be a difference maker when it comes to next year's NFL draft at the running back position.
Yeah, and that size difference does make a difference. That's why I have Edwards ahead of them, because I swear if I comped their sizes right now, if I made Donovan Edwards Dylan Sampson's size, Edwards would probably drop 15, 20 spots, like easily in the model. So I mean, it's making a big difference, because even like going to the big time run rate, Donovan Edwards was only 7% the past 2 seasons. Dylan Sampson's at 9%. And I mean, we've seen injuries and things, hamper Donovan Edwards. So obviously, like, we can make excuses for him all we want, but at some point you're a senior now. Like, you got to put it all together, dude. Like, you got to be the starter. You got to actually run. You have to not run in the back of your lineman. Like, you have to do things like that. And so we can make all the excuses we want and everything, but at some point he has to actually get out and do it. But his size is helping him stay up here in the model, because once again, if he was 190 pounds, he might not even be in the top 50.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, he's that kind of guy like Nick Singleton in some ways, super athletic, big time ability, has not maybe consistently done it. And then could he be more like a Kalen Balaj? Who people loved, like they thought he was like this super versatile back, receiving ability, athletic, and then he just ends up not being quite that type of athlete and runner. So it's like, I'm not saying that that's a great comp, but I'm saying that that's the floor, right? The
It's
floor for Donovan
it's a
Edwards is possible.
possibility, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah,
But I
right.
think speaking of a hyper athletic player, I think you might have one or two in your next questionnaire for me.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'll hit you with some running backs here. RJ Harvey, UCF back, or Jaheim White, was he West Virginia, and Demonte Chip Tranum, who is transferring from Ohio State to Kentucky. Which of the backs, Harvey, Jaheim White, or Chip Tranum, what are you feeling there?
Well, you're probably gonna hate this one, because I'm going with the little guy. Like, I'm going with Team White, man. Like, I hate it. I really do. Because he's pretty tiny. What is he? I have him listed at, where did I lost him? Oh, here he is. I have him listed at 5'7", 190. So he's a pretty tiny guy. But I will say, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Devy Beth knocks a player for being 5'7", and then they knock them for being 190. And yet he is still in my top 20 of Devy RBs, not with freshmen. So, I mean, he might be like just barely outside the top 20 with the freshmen in, but like up there enough. But it was just that freshman year was just unbelievable. I mean, as a true freshman and as a tiny guy, he had a pretty damn good workload. And I mean, he averaged 81 yards per game. So, I mean, it showed that he was definitely either just uber athletic and explosive and making big plays, which he was, because he only had 114 attempts. So it wasn't like he was like a workhorse or anything like that. But he showed that. Now, once again, he's not in the passing game, because that's not what West Virginia does. So he doesn't have a receiving profile, unfortunately. But I don't think West Virginia does that with their running backs. So that's just something that we're never going to see, unfortunately. But the 1.1 PPR points per touch, 17% big time run rate on 114 attempts. I mean, like that's almost one. What we'll say 1 in 6 attempts was a play over 20 yards. Like that's a pretty big deal. That's when you'll catch the eye of the NFL if you can continue doing that, even though you're 190 pounds and 5'7". That's the special. Now I'm not saying it will continue, but if it does continue, that's the NFL's like, I don't care that you're 5'7", 190. Like we'll figure out a way to get you onto the field. And then I feel like you have the other two, RJ Harvey, and then man, I don't even know. I honestly don't even know if I have Tranium in. Let's see. I think I put him. Oh yeah, he's so low. I don't have him high. All right, so yeah, Chip Trainum has one PPR points per touch. That's fine. That hits the threshold. He has a 1% big time run rate. Like I don't know if I've ever even seen a player have a 1% big time run rate in Devy Beth. I don't think I've seen it. He is my RB 121. In Devy Beth. Like I wasn't he a linebacker or something at some point? Like, yeah, like why are we talking about Chip Trainum? I don't understand right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm dying here, but at the end of the day, Chip Trainum has some fans out there, and I'm not saying I'm a fan necessarily. I just think that kind of shows like uh, how under the radar or lower down like RJ Harvey and Jaheim White are for me as Devy assets, but that doesn't mean that they don't have appeal to them by any means. Like RJ Harvey, super old, but he is actually really athletic. But I mean, a guy that old, I guess, should be dominating his competition. And Jaheim White,
Yeah.
a guy even with that size, like you really have to appreciate what he's been able to do thus far. One season in, just being super explosive. And we've seen the NFL now kind of warm up to the idea of a guy like a Devin Chain even like I'm thinking like a Deuce Vaughn potentially. And I'm not saying that Jaheim White is that small because it doesn't seem like he is actually. He's bigger. But then you get Chip Trayanum coming in from given what that that big time run rate was, like he's not the biggest breakaway run guy, but we will say that he's a dependable feature size back who honestly at Arizona State, like there was a lot of promise there. He didn't quite live up to that. And then Ohio State started to get some run at a running back position. I think I do agree with you having Chip latest or last, I mean, in that ranking set, but I appreciate
Very
you.
last.
Yes,
Very,
right.
very last.
Right. But I do appreciate you giving me some hope for Jaheim White and I mean maybe not as much
Actually,
hope for RJ Harvey, but we'll see.
I actually don't hate Harvey. He's close to my top 50. I have him a few spots ahead of your boy Jeremiah Love. If that makes you, I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse, but but I do have him a few spots ahead of Jeremiah Love. Not anywhere that I would feel like great about him. And I honestly had not paid attention that he was like a smaller guy too, because I was focused on Jaheim White being so small, but obviously RJ Harvey's pretty tiny as well. But like you said, he's a 5th-year player, so we can't be overly excited about that. He does have an 11% big time run rate. He has a decent receiving profile. Like these are the things that are keeping him up a little bit higher. He had 130 scrimmage yards in his best season, like per game, and so I mean like things that you would like to see, but once again, 5th-year player, smaller guy. What are the odds that the NFL is going to truly covet that? Probably not that great. So like I feel like I have him in a pretty realistic spot where like he could be one of those back end guys that you throw on the onto your roster at the end of the 5th round in a rookie draft or something like that, and hope for the best. Honestly, I would want to say that he's like he could be not truly confident in the players or anything, but like he could be next year's Kamani Vidal, where like he's a smaller guy that put up pretty prolific numbers, and then no one really knows who they are for the most, like the mainstream people don't know who they are, and next thing you know, He starts getting some hype. He goes to the combine. He does something like that, and now he's getting some hype. So I don't hate him by any means. I do hate chip training. Get him the hell out of here.
Will do, John. Thank you. Thank you. Give me maybe another grouping of running backs here. Hopefully, even more exciting than the ones I just gave you.
Yeah, it was fun though. I mean, I had fun with it. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed it. But yeah, this is a pretty fun one. I think this one might be difficult. It was difficult for me. But I have Caleb Jackson out of LSU, Justice Haynes out of Alabama, and then Damian Martinez out of Oregon State. Obviously, you have two second-year players, and then you have a third-year player that is in kind of a precarious situation, I guess you could say. So, it's really difficult to rank all these guys because you have some smaller samples, and then you have a player that's kind of proven it, but doesn't have that pedigree.
Yeah, that's a very interesting group there. And honestly, I do like these backs that you presented. So you're not making it easy on me. I'll say Justice Haynes, probably the most unproven of the group, right? I mean, you could make a case that Caleb Jackson is similarly unproven. So I guess we'll maybe call that somewhat of a wash. And then Damian Martinez,
Yeah,
the guy that
it's 37 attempts to 25, so it's not that much of a difference.
Right. I mean, I feel like we saw Justice Haynes just a little bit for Alabama versus we actually got to see like, ooh, Caleb Jackson could be very interesting going forward. A little bit more of a question marks there. Like, who's going to emerge at Alabama versus like Caleb Jackson? It seems kind of clear like he's going to be that next guy up. So Caleb Jackson's very interesting at LSU, but that's still not going to deter me. I'm still going to go with Justice Haynes as the guy to roster from that situation. And I'm just going to go with the proven nature of these Alabama backs. And he was just such a talented guy. He forced his way onto the field, even though there was a deep room there. There were plenty of other backs they could have went with at Alabama, but they wanted to specifically get a look at him ahead of Jamarian Miller in some games. With the other guys they had there, what's his name? Going over to FSU now. Why am I blanking on him? But Alabama's always
I'm
stacked,
blanking too.
right? Yeah, but anyways, Justice Haynes, just super talented recruit from last year, maybe falling down a little bit off our radars in some cases because we didn't get to see him. Yeah, Roydell Williams, like he was another guy. Like, I mean, you wouldn't really expect to see a lot of Haynes, but he still showed up. And at the end of the day, I think he's going to have a very bright future ahead of him. This is not a knock on Caleb Jackson. I think he could be very good as well. But Damian Martinez, too, as a guy who's been good, but now that team is kind of taking a step down in competition. So that's not necessarily going to elevate what NFL teams think of him. And I don't really know what the future is going to be there at Oregon State. Like maybe he does exactly what he did this last year, but there doesn't seem to be a ton of buzz for him. I really hope more buzz originates because he's a talented player as well. I have him top 12, I want to say, for my running backs right now. So definitely like high up there in Devy, but I have Justice Haynes top 6 in Devy running backs right now. So I like him a lot.
I like it. I hate to be controversial, of course, but I actually have Haynes as my RB3 in this grouping. And here's my I actually do have reasoning. Like in it's not big time run rate. I swear, like half the time it ends up being like, oh, just look at the big time run rate. They don't have it. That's not the case because Justice Haynes has it. It's not the PPR points per touch. He has it. That's not the problem. He was not a receiver last year. No, he was a true freshman. Nobody was really a receiver, like as far as like a receiving option. Obviously he was not a receiver, but like a receiving option. He has 0 receptions. Now Jam Miller is not going anywhere. He only had 4 receiving receptions, but those were like the only 4 receptions. Like Jalen Monroe's not exactly throwing it to the running back very often. So what are the odds that Justice Haynes all of a sudden becomes this great receiving option that everyone's like, oh yeah, he's got it, whatever. As of right now, I feel like Jam Miller is going to be the third down back, or at least the player that receives those throws. Now, I believe that Justice Haynes will be at least the 1 and 2, like the first and second down back. And I believe that he's going to be a better player than Jam Miller. This is not me saying that I have Jam Miller ahead of Justice Haynes. That is not the case. But I'm saying I don't know if Justice Haynes is going to be able to showcase his abilities as a receiver, and that's going to leave us question marks in the future. And then we, like once again, Jalen Milroe is not this amazing quarterback to where we can say, oh, he's going to dump it off, he's going to do the right thing, he's going to throw it a million times, and we're going to get 30, 40 receptions for Justice Haynes. It's just not going to happen. Caleb Jackson, in a very small sample, already showed that he has a receiving profile. Like he's good in that aspect, and he also hit a lot of those same thresholds, the high PPR points per touch, the high big time run rate, all that kind of stuff that Justice Haynes did, in a slightly larger sample, and he's still at a good. He still had a quality school, LSU. He's still a quality SEC school. It's going to be on the radar. I feel like when it's all said and done, Caleb Jackson has a better chance of ending the year higher, even though Justice Haynes is higher right now. And then I probably should have Justice Haynes over Damian Martinez because, like you said, we seem to be the only people that actually care. And Andrew Coops in the chat saying, laughing out loud, I hate to be controversial. I really do. I truly hate it. But yeah, so Damian Martinez is probably going to fall off the face of the planet, but I feel like it's just me and you, or you and I, like actually like loving him. But man, is that dude he's proven it. Like he's already proven it. And we can't say the same for Caleb Jackson and Justice Haynes. And like I said, I'm kind of worried that Justice Haynes isn't even going to truly get his shot to prove it this year. And so I'm trying to think of, like, at the end of the year, who's going to be where. And I still feel like Damian Martinez has a decent shot of being in the mix when it's all said and done. And you were saying how you have Damian Martinez is your top 12. I have him in my top 10. So I feel even maybe a little bit higher about it than you.
Yeah, right. And you very well might be. Like I said, it could be, I guess, because I am that high on Justice Haynes. Like I am higher than maybe some on him. But I think at the end of the day, Alabama running back track record speaks for itself. And you can't really put that into a model necessarily, just going off of a freshman year. I mean, you can, but like I'm going to say that I'll take a stab at a guy like that, just going on him saying that he will rise up because he was more efficient than Caleb Jackson. And if you're going to say that Caleb Jackson's 6 receptions like makes him like, ahead of Haynes for some reason
on 37 touches, on 37 attempts, like, maybe when you add in the 6 receptions and, you're talking about 43 total touches and he had 6 receptions. That's pretty damn good.
Oh yeah. I mean, not that it's bad, but at the end of the day, I just don't really think that six receptions for me is going to be something that sways me against Haynes, because you saw it in high school that he was a capable receiver. If he was a guy who just never has really shown any ability whatsoever to catch the ball, that'd be a different case. But Justice Haynes was a functional receiver in high school. Not necessarily like the highest volume type of guy, but most high school backs are not. So at the end of the day, I think you bring up good points, and at least kind of bringing us back to reality of like Damian Martinez, Caleb Jackson, they're all very good backs. If you don't like Justice Haynes, potentially trade down or wait on a running back and grab one of those guys.
And it's not even me saying I don't like Justice Haynes. That's not what I want the takeaway to be. But I mean, we've seen these Alabama backs have not been hitting lately, unfortunately, and they've been splitting it a lot, and once again, rushing quarterback. And that's another thing that kind of goes in Caleb Jackson's favor, is they're going from Jaden Daniels to Garrett Nussmeier, and Garrett Nussmeier is a complete zero, maybe even a negative in the rushing game that we talked about earlier. So what does that equal? That equals dump offs to the running back. So he had 6 receptions on 43 touches last year. Well, now all of a sudden, we have a quarterback that's probably going to dump it off a lot more. Maybe that, ends up, doubling or the percentage wise and everything. Next thing you know, he hits that 20, 30 reception threshold that we kind of look for. And when, like I said, Justice Haynes doesn't do that. And now people are like, oh, well, we have to move, Caleb Jackson ahead of that. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I don't feel great about any of these arguments because, like they're all quality players as far as I'm concerned. And so it was a very difficult one for me and for you, obviously. But I think I might actually be the highest person on Caleb Jackson. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, you certainly might be. I think right as it stands at this moment, I have him RB13 in Devy. So like him, don't know exactly, if I'm going to have him top 10 here, but he has the capability. He definitely has the ability to rise into that spot, especially once we lose a bunch of guys in this talented upcoming class. So,
I I
um,
have him RB5.
wow. So I mean, we basically have him and Haynes flipped. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it is. Like,
Yep.
and it's kind of an interesting tier there. But I'm going to hit you with a couple of wide receivers here. We'll do kind of one last round of guys, and these are going to be some exciting players. Hopefully, you can give me some guidance here of what I should be doing with this grouping. So, Luther Burden, Missouri wide receiver that you love, Zachariah Branch, USC wide receiver, and Jeremiah Smith. So we have guys from multiple draft classes here. Jeremiah Smith is an incoming freshman going to Ohio State. Zachariah Branch was a freshman last year at USC, and then Luther Burden, freshman the year before that. So now he's in his third season at Missouri. Do you have a clear guy where you're like, ooh, I really want this guy out of this group? Or what is your take from that couple of guys there?
It's 100% Jeremiah Smith. That I want him on my team. He was the first person to lose his stripe today at Ohio State. So I mean, it literally happened earlier this afternoon. First person in the offseason to lose his black stripe, and yeah, like he's the high end prospect. I have concerns about. It sounds stupid, but I have concerns about players going to wide receivers going to Ohio State, and I know everyone's has just decided that Ohio State is wide receiver U, and you just take every player that goes to wide receiver U, but they're kind of skipping over all of the 5-star prospects that didn't hit that went to the same university, and it's like, well, yeah, I don't feel great about I don't feel great about anyone that has to go sit behind anyone else, but I don't think Jeremiah Smith is going to sit, and that's why I feel better about him than some of these other prospects that are going to the same school, because I really feel like he's going to go be at least the 2, because I feel like Emeka Egbuka is still going to be the 1, even though he's technically more of the slot receiver and all that kind of stuff. I feel like he might fit better with Will Howard and like it not being a great passer than Jeremiah Smith and being like an outside guy will. But I mean, we'll just have to wait and see on that. And I mean, Emeka Egbuka is a more proven player. He is a very high end prospect who has shown that he is amazing when he's healthy. So yeah, I feel great about Egbuka, but I believe that Jeremiah Smith can go out there. He can beat all the year 1-0 theories and do all that kind of stuff. At least showcase some of his abilities. Our good friend Anand Enduri, huge Ohio State fan, covers them, watches all of them. He goes to the practices. He does that. He says that Jeremiah Smith is like one of the best 18-year-olds he's ever seen in college and all this kind of stuff. So I mean, he is giving his personal vouch for him, and I'm going to go ahead and take that vouch because he's watched a lot of these players. And I mean, not to say that he doesn't usually have rose color glasses on, because he usually does, but I mean, the best 18-year-old I've ever seen is a pretty good compliment. So I'll go ahead and take Jeremiah Smith here, and then you're not going to believe this. You're really not going to believe this, but I have Luther Burden at 2. I have Zachariah Branch at 3. And that takes a lot for me to say. If you know my history with Luther Burden, Burden has actually proven something. It's not what people want it to be. He's not that like true high end talent that I think people still think he is, but he has proven ability. And he has proven the ability to be the number 1 option on his team and stuff like that. And so I have Luther Burden in my tier 3 for wide receivers, but because of the ambiguous nature of the Devy realm right now, he ends up in my top 10 for wide receivers. Like, and that's saying a lot. Like, I'm giving him credit. I'm trying to give him credit here. I really am trying. But I don't truly believe in Luther Burden, the player. I really do. Like, I honestly believe he's closer to the Laviska Chenaults of the world than he is to the Devo Samuels or whoever people want him to end up being. And so that's why but I mean, he put up what did he put up last year? 1,209 yards, 1,209 yards last year. Like, that's a quality college season. I can't just completely discount it. I can't just discredit that and say it never happened or anything like that. So I have to have him up here. Zachariah Branch was like, one of the highest end players going into last season, one of the highest in prospects, going to Caleb Williams, going to USC, everything you would want him to be. And in my research, that I've been doing with the freshman, he was one of the higher end options in that. So I'm not discounting that by any means or whatever. But he was a low ADOT player who didn't do very much. It was unfortunately, it was very Luther Burden-esque, like of what he did in his true freshman season. And so now we have to say, okay, he has to go take that next step. Well, Luther Burden did it because Dominic Lovett left, and then he took over the Dominic Lovett position. Is that happening at USC? Like, can we say that or guarantee that that anything happened with that? Because I don't even know that anyone had that role or even had a role last year to say that somebody else, he's going to go take another. Because is he going to be the outside guy as a smaller, player and everything at USC with some, pretty quality talent there? I don't know. You could probably attest more to that than I can. All I can truly tell you is that what he did on the field, as electric as he is, he didn't show that he's a wide receiver.
Yeah, that's very fair at this point. Zachariah Branch has a lot to prove. While he has that, like you said, athletic talent, that alone is not going to be quite enough to really make it work at the NFL level. Lots of guys, and especially diminutive guys, have come before him, and like the Rondale Moores of the world, and I could go down a long list of those guys who have been really tantalizing prospects, broken out early, etc., but maybe not quite had enough wide receiver abilities to make it work at the NFL level. So we'll be very attentively monitoring that. I think that's a very fair thing to have him as the third option there. I agree with you that Luther Burden should be right ahead. We might disagree on how we qualitatively describe Luther Burden and what he's been able to accomplish, but I still think he has a high ceiling at least. But Jeremiah Smith, it really just depends how willing you are to put a guy we just don't know how he's going to play on the field as a collegiate player. That's a big thing because he's been a stud in high school. He's an amazing recruit. He's my wide receiver one in the class amongst these freshmen. And there's just really not a lot to dislike with him. I mean, the guy is a beast. I don't know if you saw the picture. This is not analysis, by the way, but this is just observation. But the picture of him compared to like Brandon Innes and those guys, it's like, he's not the freshman. They're the freshmen. Like he's a beast. He put on 41 pounds between his junior and senior year in high school. Like
hey, that's how I found out Audric Estime, just based on a picture. So, I mean, maybe that's how we can find Jeremiah Smith too.
There you go. But and he's still very athletic on the field. Like, don't worry. Like, he didn't suddenly get slow. Like, he's still a complete wide receiver. Strong profile, production wise, all that stuff. So, I mean, Jeremiah Smith here, probably a little bit more interesting at this point with that upside than a Zachariah Branch, who, for a smaller guy like that to hit has to be kind of perfect. So I think that you did some good convincing there. I still don't know if I'm in a startup, if I'm bold enough to take or smash that draft button of Jeremiah Smith ahead of like a Luther Burden, but at the very end of the day, you make an argument of like why you could potentially trade down if you weren't sold on Smith, but we should be pretty sold on Smith at this point. Like he's a safe enough prospect, as safe as you can really get. So
if anything, the takeaway might be that, sell Zachariah Branch if you have him, because he's still being held to that high regard. And I cannot say that he's not going to hit. What I can say is he actually ran a decent amount of routes last year. He ran 169 routes, which is a good amount. I mean, it's definitely not a full workload or anything like that, but like that's a good amount of routes to kind of figure out who this player is. Are they earning targets? Are they doing that kind of thing? He does 7% market share in that offense. Looking at that offense, it was Brendan Rice and Taj Washington, and then they just didn't use Dorian Singer at all. Like they didn't use that position because he was doing more of the shorter stuff, and that's not Caleb Williams' game. But to me, looking at we know who Brendan Rice is. We know who Taj Washington is. Like I feel like we would Taj. I feel like I feel like it's just completely ignoring what happened on the actual field. And, even though these big time programs don't always let the freshman get on, he was on the field a decent amount of the time and he wasn't truly earning targets or anything like that. So, not saying that it can't happen. Obviously, we have a quarterback change here. This quarterback's going to be completely different. I'm not a big fan of the new quarterback, but maybe he's going to use or utilize that shorter game, or however they're going to use Zachariah Branch. Maybe he'll utilize that more. But it's a complete projection. And so like I feel like maybe you can take this time and say, hey, yeah, like I love the guy, he's electric, but I'm gonna go, take this time last year I was telling people to trade Luther Burden to go get Malik Neighbors. And I bet if anyone actually listened to me, I bet they're pretty damn happy right now, because as much as people love Luther Burden, I bet they love Malik Neighbors a hell of a lot more, but he wasn't held to that regard just yet, and so that's what I'm saying. Like go make those kind of trades now to move up a year, especially in Devy. Okay, so now I don't have to wait 2 years for Zachariah Branch, or possibly even longer. I can go get a player that's going to come out now.
Yeah, good point. I think that is a better takeaway, to sell Zachariah Branch. Try to get a Jeremiah Smith. Try to do something like that. So, good call there. How about? Okay, you have some wide receivers here for me, don't you?
I do, and this has ended up being a pretty long show. So I mean, not necessarily longer than normal, but maybe it will be by the time we're done with this. Who knows? I've been rambling. So I have. All right, so I have. You basically explained to me that I'm like the highest person on Eric Singleton Jr. It's Jr., right? I believe he is. So I have Eric Singleton Jr., Jonte Cook, and Carnell Tate. And I would assume that most people do not have those three players in a tier. However, I do. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that to you. And I want you to tell me why I shouldn't have Eric Singleton Jr. in this tier with these other two players.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna admit that your love for Eric Singleton Jr. It's just, I think it's just such a big shock to people in the community. They're like, "Well, a Georgia Tech guy, like, how can you have him that high, especially after only 1 year of flashes?" So I think that's really the big concern that people have versus Cardinal Tate. He's an Ohio State wide receiver. He got involved as a true freshman. Same thing with Jonte Cook. He's a Texas wide receiver. Those guys were much higher end, like 5-star type of wide receiver recruits versus obviously Eric Singleton Jr. going to Georgia Tech was not. So while they're all in that same class of 2026, Carnell Tate and Jonte Cook, they just seem like they're much more flashy options. But yeah, I mean, that's ignoring what Eric Singleton Jr. did as a true freshman. So I think maybe you would be better off, touting him because you seem to have Singleton Jr. that high. But at the end of the day, I am still going to take Carnell Tate. I could flip it pretty easily here. Like, who could be the wide receiver one at their school more easily? And I actually think that Jonte Cook could probably do that more easily. Like, I think that he has a better shot of beating out the guys there at Texas versus, like, I mean, Carnell Tate would have to beat Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. Plus, I mean, I don't know if people like Mylan Graham still at this point to that level, but like, I mean, Mylan Graham's going to be there the next couple of years, you would think too. So at the end of the day, Carnell Tate will probably be like the wide receiver 2 there for a while. And I don't know if Jonte Cook will be the wide receiver 2. Like, he could easily be that wide receiver 1 at Texas. So I go back and forth. I have him back to back in my ranks. And maybe that's not a definitive answer. So I will say, if you want a little bit more potential upside, I'd say Jonte Cook. That would have been my pick preseason last year when breaking down these rookies. Carnell Tate at this point, I think he's valued higher in Devy circles. So if you're somebody who likes to play that value game, maybe you go with the Carnell Tate and either flip them or just roll with that, being a pretty safe bet with an Ohio State receiver like that. So, and not to forget about Eric Singleton Jr. Maybe you'll tell us here why you might want to consider him, John.
Yeah, and the thing is, I've been listening to a lot of campstocanton.com pods lately, and Austin Nace was talking recently about how they're kind of falling out of love with Carnell Tate, which is hilarious because it seemed like everyone was just like, nope, Carnell Tate's a stud, last year, and then he was the only one there to break the year 1-0, as far as I know, and he lost his stripe first and all that kind of stuff, but now we're starting to hear some rumors like he's not a great athlete, and unfortunately, it doesn't. I wouldn't even say it doesn't show up because like he has a decent yards per reception and everything. Like it's fine. So I once again I have them all in the same tier. I'm not saying that Jonte and Carnell or Tate are bad players or anything like that, but I have been hearing more rumors lately that like people are a little concerned. Jeremiah Smith might be that much better. And then Carnell Tate kind of loses the job because like Buka's not going anywhere, So maybe there's room for all three, but then we have a quarterback that's not the greatest quarterback, and especially when it comes to passing. And so, is there enough to go around? I guess is the biggest question. So somebody could fall out. I would probably feel a lot better about Jonte Cook at this point, and I do have Jonte Cook just ahead of Carnell Tate. I mean, literally back to back. So I have them there. Jonte really did flash. I liked what I saw. He only ran 41 routes, so of course we don't love that. But 17 yards per reception, 11.1 for the ADOT, and 2.7 PPR points per touch. Really, like he already 3.02 yards per team pass attempt while he was playing. Like that is an elite number. Although it was 41, passing attempts that he was actually on the field for, or 41 routes, I should say. So like that isn't the greatest. Obviously, only 10 receiving yards per game because he didn't play that much. A 3.36% market share because he didn't play that much. It's a projection, but we're saying that Jonte can take over now. I mean, we have two probably NFL draft first round talents, or at least NFL draft first round players this year in Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell being drafted there that are gone and for Jonte, and all of a sudden he takes over. And we can kind of say the same thing for Carnell Tate, but once again we have another high end player coming in that might just take his spot. So I don't feel great about that. And then Eric Singleton Jr. is just the most proven player of the three. I mean, by far. He's already hit a 25% market share. He's already hit almost 3 PPR points per touch. Let's see, where are we? 60 yards per game as a true freshman. 2.27 yards per team pass attempt. And 15 for yards per reception. 714 receiving yards. Like 3.2 PPR points per touch. Just everything that you want to see. And he had a very high ADOT. So, I mean, they're not exactly like easy passes. And it's probably showing, if not route running ability, at least the ability to separate and get open, like that kind of thing. And so that's what I love to see for a player. And, yes, it's not the greatest team as far as putting players in the NFL and all that kind of stuff. But when a player does flash and when a player does do what he's done, we have to take note. And so it's not really a small sample or anything like that. We can't say. And so I have to have him up here, but yet I feel like I'm the only person that actually does have him up here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Singleton Jr. is a top 15 wide receiver for me and Devy, so he has moved up certainly. But at the end of the day, I do waffle back and forth between the Tate and Cook there, with Singleton a little bit behind, but by no means is he a slouch. Like you said, he did some very impressive things, and I liked his hands. And I don't think you're wrong to say that he could have some ability to be a good route runner. He could have some ability to be a separator. I saw that as well when I was watching him. So there's interest there. And I think the biggest thing with Carnell Tate is I don't know truthfully like how great he's going to be as like a downfield threat. He could easily be like a Chris Godwin or a Michael Thomas or a Michael Pittman Jr. or somebody like that who runs shorter to intermediate routes, has very good success rates there. But I mean, Carnell Tate, I think that was maybe my bigger concern from him from high school as well, as we didn't necessarily see him taking all these like 70, 80-yard plays. Like there was just not a lot of that at IMG Academy and not a lot of that yet at Ohio State either. So he's consistent player, but is he going to stand out relative to his competition? I don't know. So I think Jonte Cook there is a solid call if people are interested in comparing those players there. So I mean, Jonte, we both really liked him last year, and like you said, a smaller sample, but he looks to be set up super well this year as well.
Yeah, I love it. I talked about Austin Ace earlier, and he had Jonte as his wide receiver one last year, so it was a great call by him. And I didn't have Jonte as my wide receiver one in the class then, but I do now. So I fixed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, right. I had a Branch and then Jonte as number 2. So, I mean, those guys, they're still retaining really good value to this point. And I mean, there's a chance we could see Jonte Cook um, surpass Zachariah Branch easily this season. He just needs to actually get on the field consistently at Texas, which, I mean, I guess we should expect that, but there's just so much talent there that it's never a guarantee by any means.
That might be the trade that you go make. You sell Zachariah Branch for Jonte Cook plus, or even
Yeah.
if it's straight up. I hate doing straight up trades, same position, but I mean sometimes it's worth it when it's this big of a disparity for me. In my ranks, I'd say yeah, I'll just go ahead and do it. But like normally speaking, I'm like no, give me something, like give me a supplemental fourth or something that
Yeah.
that I can say like yeah, give me something. But I'm honestly, I'd be willing to just do it straight up. Just give me Jonte, and you can have Zachariah. And I might be wrong. I very well could be, but I feel better about Jonte right now.
It's fair. And you can get something on top. So if you are in a league with John here, maybe exploit that. But I think that you can get even more than just Jonte Cook if you're trading away Zachariah Branch at this point. Which, yeah, something to be
Ooh,
exploiting for sure.
I would like that. I don't have any Branch, unfortunately, so I can't do that. But I can't make that trade, but I would. But now I'm trying to figure out who I could trade to go get Jonte. Like who else? I don't know. We've talked a lot. We're almost at an hour 40. We
Yeah,
probably shouldn't dive down that road.
yeah, right. That could be a long road, but I know John's not a Travis Hunter guy, so if you trade Travis Hunter, I'm sure John would like to get Cook in that deal.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely would. I would do all of that. Kevin Concepcion, like any of those players, if somebody
Micah
has them
Hudson,
over.
Micah
Micah
Hudson,
Hudson,
yeah,
yeah, I'd do that
see
one
that.
because he's gonna have like 300 yards maybe next year when everyone's like, no, he's the wide receiver one. All right,
Yeah, right.
we've talked enough. We can we can call this one quits. This has been a lot of fun. I truly enjoyed this. We should do this more often, and just throughout the season. Like as we're struggling to really rank some of these players. Oh, and we both decided that tight ends are just gross. Like yeah, there was no reason for us to talk about a tight end tonight. So we did agree on that one.
I mean, as much as we want to give them respect, maybe sometime I'll bring back the solo pod, right? And just go into the tight ends for those sickos out there who are just really like needing that tight end content. But I think for tonight, you're not going to get that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, now that I'm a freshman expert, I'm not even allowing the solo pods anymore, and I'm not doing it. So
Yeah, but for tight ends, I don't know if you could tolerate it, John. It's a
I might
tough.
not be able to. We'll
It's
see.
kind of a dark place. Yeah.
It is. Oh, actually, I lied. You were asking about Bryson Nesbitt earlier, and for some reason I have him listed as a wide receiver, but he is pretty high up here. I just noticed his name, so that was something we were talking about earlier in the night. But yeah, enough about that. Aaron, do you have any words of wisdom for us before we get out of here?
Yeah. Well, as far as this exercise goes, I know it's just a fun exercise, fun drill for us to go through and be able to compare and help each other out. But I do really challenge people out there who are struggling to really just sit down and compare a couple guys, whether it's in your draft, right in your draft queue, whether it's supplemental, startup, etc., and just kind of see like who do you think has the highest upside there objectively. Try to be as objective as possible, comparing these players to each other. And I think if you spend that extra time instead of just randomly saying, "Yeah, I don't have a share of this guy, I'll just randomly draft this guy," you'll avoid a lot of those misses if you're a little bit more careful and selective about the guys that you're willing to roster, the guys that you're willing to trade for or draft. So just be selective out there, and take your time when considering these options. But hopefully that was an enjoyable podcast for y'all.
Yeah, definitely. And that's my goal is in the next week or so to write an article showcasing the research that I've done for the freshmen, but then how do we utilize that in our supplemental drafts? How do we say, okay, but I have Jonte Cook ranked ahead of this guy or below this guy, or that kind of thing. And I want to be able to try to show people like this is how we should do it. This is when you should feel comfortable making those kind of moves. Like, okay, now I'm going to go back to the freshman well because I don't feel great about these guys, or like I have to take this guy because he's already proven it. For me and Eric Singleton Jr. But then you of course you run into the risk of like, okay, other people aren't as high, so I don't have to take them as high, and that's where we have to that's what I'm trying to focus on for the next week or so. Get that article out. That'll be on dynastyleaguefootball.com. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. I do appreciate you guys listening. It was a lot of fun. We will see you next time.